Hi everyone, welcome to this video. In this video, I'll give you a brief introduction to what synchronicity means. You may have come across this term when reading Jung. It's not an introductory term, but it's a popularly used term, and I would say popularly abused term. So, it's okay. It has wide-ranging metaphysical implications, and I just want to I try to keep this at 10-15 minutes, this video, and I will make a series out of this where I'll talk about more details of synchronicity and how this unfolds also in the Jungian metaphysical and psychological or system of analytical psychology. Okay, English, it'll be with me. So, synchronicity. So for Jung, synchronicity is the not correlated but meaningfully linked occurrence of two independent events. So two events that are not correlated but linked, or let's say coincide according to their meaning. So a meaningful coincidence is what you'll read often. So what does this mean? Jung gives an example, popular example. He had a patient has heart problems. Jung knows this because the patient's wife told him. Jung recommends the patient to go to the cardiologist. Patient goes to Jung with this outtake report and says, oh, everything's great, I'm healthy. Patient walks home and dies. And in the moment when he dies, or shortly before, the patient's wife, with whom Jung is acquainted, that's why he knows, reports that there were a lot of birds on her balcony. I think she was sitting on her balcony. This is somewhere in Switzerland, beautiful Switzerland, lots of birds suddenly. Lots of birds, swarm of birds. And extraordinarily many birds, right? Of course. And so these two events coincided. So her husband's death and birds. Okay, you may say, okay, birds, death could be a coincidence, right? But then she says to Jung, look, this happened when my grandmother died and when my mother died, and now it happens when my husband dies. So the coincidence becomes meaningful. Okay. And this is the personal unconscious or personal level of meaning, let's say. But there's another level, and Jung emphasizes this, and this is very interesting. The fact that birds are always associated in many cultures associated with death, or the soul leaving the body, or the soul coming into the body. So the transit of life, this transitory period or liminal period of life, birds appear. Think of the Bible where you have the dove, right? And so this makes the coincidence meaningful in two ways. It makes it meaningful on a personal level to this patient, and it makes it meaningful on an archetypal level. So on a level, and this is where it becomes interesting, on a level of the structure of reality. And so for Jung, synchronicity or synchronistic events, there are two different aspects of synchronicity. There are synchronistic events, and then there's synchronicity as an organizing principle. So a synchronistic event is an event where a person encounters the meaningful coincidence of two factors, let's say, or two occurrences, like this patient. The synchronistic organization of reality is, according to Jung, always present. So reality in general is organized according to synchronistic events. So there are always co-occurrences, let's say, and how exactly this works, I'll discuss in another video, and how exactly this plays out also in terms of the archetypes, and in terms of the general architecture of the psyche, and what implications this has metaphysically for us. But and here it's also very important to recognize the overlap of the material and psychic worlds, right? Like you have a strange, in the Jungian system, you don't have sort of this harsh distinction between mind and matter. It just doesn't really exist, because you see, you have this. It's a bird chirping outside here. So there's a you have this patient's history and these two physical events that occur, right? The death of her husband and the birds, and that all is sort of connected, or its meaning arises in this instance of her interaction. Jung says, you can argue that, oh well, it's just her interpretation. You know, she sees this, she sees that. She says, oh, this is how I'm going to interpret it. Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. But then I'll ask you, like, what's the difference? Like, what difference does it make? Like, the point is that it traces, once you pay attention, it traces, like, these synchronistic events trace the unfolding or the development of certain occurrences over time, or certain trends over time. And again, if you recall what we said about the archetypes, that there are certain trajectories along which reality unfolds. So the synchronistic organization is a part of that puzzle. And the synchronistic event is when this structure, or this layer, the structure of reality, the structure of the cosmos comes to the surface and is seen or perceived by the ego. So this is my very brief introduction. Synchronistic events are not necessarily, it can be that, like you meet, often it's like, oh, you meet someone and you fall in love, and I don't know, this is just how this cringy version of synchronicity that I'm thinking of, like, oh, synchronicity was meant to be, destiny. It's all these words like destiny, synchronicity, meaning, blah, like all these words dropped in like one sentence, and it's very cringy. But the point is that you'll know when something is truly synchronistic. Like, it'll be like, let's say you're talking to someone about how badly you want a chocolate cake, and 5 minutes later someone brings you chocolate, like randomly, your neighbor is like, oh, I have some chocolate cake left over, do you want it? That's sort of one, you could say that's synchronicity. And so I think the interesting thing for me is that, do you know this flow state, like FLOW state, where you're in flow with reality, or like it's related to working, but when you're in flow, you could say that in that moment you're aligned, and so you see more of these occurrences. You see that reality is just there unfolding, right? That reality is not so, and again, this plays into this distinction, ego and collective unconscious. Reality is not always so ego driven, right? I think that's one of the most important points, but it's reality instead is, there's something, a force to it. Wow, I'm sounding so like new agey. There's a force to life that pulls you along a certain trajectory if you go along and don't resist. And resistance is not always willfully doing stupid stuff, like something that is definitely not meant to be, but it takes a lot of like seeing and care, detachment, and work, I guess, and again, I'm not preaching, but I think that's how Jung means it, that events, like, and sometimes synchronistic events, no matter how unaligned you are, synchronistic events will occur, like they occur. That's the nature of the event. It's just a question how they always occur. That's the point with this whole layer thing. It's just a question, how often will they pierce into your ego? How often will you see them? How often will they pierce through and hit you and change something? Because that's ultimately the point, right? Ultimately, the point is that you see, it's like following breadcrumbs on a path. The path leads towards yourself. Wow. Dramatic ending. Okay, thank you for tuning in, and have a good day. And see you next time.